Hello everyone, this is Tug. In this video, we're showcasing a new custom Ravenfield map that's really chilly. Introducing Polar, a hybrid map with 5 capture points, close quarters lanes, plenty of sightlines for snipers, and one super cool design choice that makes this map really unique, which I will talk about later in the video. Now, I said this was a hybrid map, so what do I mean? I call it that just because, at first, Polar seems like a fast-paced run-and-gun type map where you try to mow down your enemies as fast as possible. But if you play for a while, you learn how to play the map effectively to your advantage, and the way that you do that is by completely ignoring the CQB aspects of the map and treating it like a wide-open battlefield that requires slow-paced play in order to win. But before we get to that, I want to start by talking about the visuals, because they're super tight. I'll be honest, the map kind of looks like toothpaste, like everything is saturated with this piercing shade of aqua. I think my monitor was starting to smell like mint at one point while I was playing, and if you look close enough at the ice, you can actually see the Colgate logo. Okay, jokes aside, despite the narrow color palette of Polar, it manages to grasp that solid atmosphere that so many other maps try for, but just can't seem to perfect. Here, the wind is howling, there's falling snow, moving water, and there's no definite end to the landscape. It just continues on and on into the horizon indefinitely. And that gives you a real sense that you're fighting in some lost military base somewhere in the Arctic that literally doesn't exist on a map. That hopeless feeling fuels your drive to fight harder and take hold of what was once lost. Okay, it's probably not that deep, but the point I'm trying to make is that Polar's visuals are pieced together incredibly well. Spawning in as an eagle, you're greeted with 3 options. Go left along the ice wall, go straight up the middle into utter chaos, or go right into the shallow waters where all good soldiers go to drown. The safest play here is to capture the flag on the left and then use that spawn point as a staging area to cut through the center of the map and prevent ravens from flowing through the other lanes. The fact alone that you can peek both Eagle and Raven spawns from this one capture point places so much value on it. If you control this one, you can potentially control the whole map without going anywhere else. So that's one easy way to win. The flag in the center of the map is heavily favored by the Ravens due to its placement, but it can be a fun one to try and tackle with brute force. If you let the Ravens grab this flag early in the game, defending the shallow waters will be exponentially more difficult, since the enemy will then have a close staging point to that flank route. But using that same logic, you can move from the waters to flank around and hit both of these Raven flags. And this is the part of the map that I teased earlier, and to me, it's what makes the map so unique and fun. Notice how unrestricted this side of the map is. There's very little cover, and you can move close to the walls for a quick push up enemy lines, or you could swim extremely far out and play for picks, effectively containing Ravens on their side of the map. And honestly, that's kind of how you're supposed to play on Polar. If you don't control the map, flag ownership will flip-flop super fast simply because of how easy it is to move in and out of lanes and catch soldiers off guard. But thankfully, the map gives you a number of tools at your disposal to handle map control. Quickly push up the left capture point and secure those sight lines, guard the flank routes and the waters, or just play defensively and snipe from cover points straight down the center of the map. It's such a great design for a map that breaks the mold of typical Ravenfield gameplay, but still feels good enough to mix in with the vanilla lineup. In terms of alternative game modes, you can play them all on Polar. However, I don't think the map was designed much with Spec Ops in mind, because it's hard to be stealthy on this map, and the closeness of capture points means your objectives may be squished together during a mission, and you'll most likely end up alerting enemies when you didn't mean to. That's not really a deal breaker though. You can still definitely play Spec Ops here, but I'd say this map thrives in point matches and battalions. Skirmish and Domination also work great, same with Haunted also. So now that we've gone over everything in detail, let's break it all down into a list of pros and cons. Starting with the pros, we have a wide variety of play styles that you can choose from. Like I mentioned earlier, you can play a lot of different ways, especially the further right you go on this map. There's a lot of flex space to work with lining up your shots, so take advantage of that using whatever you're most comfortable with. Next up, the map is the perfect size. Now this one's a little bit more subjective because most people enjoy larger or smaller maps, but in general this one will fit the needs for any game mode, except it leans on the small side for Spec Ops like I already said. It's objectively a good thing if you advertise your map as just a generic battle map, and then it plays exactly like how you advertise and can end up meeting a variety of needs from the player, and that's why this is a pro. And then lastly, for the pros, we have great performance. Again, this will vary from player to player, but as far as I can tell, this map runs incredibly well, and even with some of the visual effects in large environment, it still poses zero problems for most PCs. Now, moving on to the cons, there's only two things that I want to mention here. And number one is the visuals. Now, I talked about this at the start of the video, and while I praise the map for a coherent aesthetic, I make this a con because it's almost too coherent. Like, there isn't much contrast going on with the colors to help differentiate what I'm supposed to be looking at. Everything is some shade of blue or gray. You know, it's not as bad as it could be, and it does all match at least, but I believe that the design could benefit from a wider color palette just for the sake of the player. And the last thing that I want to tack on here is that you'll sometimes spot AI getting into places that they shouldn't be. Like, for example, they might teleport on top of some of the ice walls. Now, this may be intentional, but I highly doubt it. It's rare enough of an occurrence to where it doesn't ruin the gameplay, but it's something to note if you get shot out of nowhere and then it turns out it came from like a mile above you. But for real, the AI movement is janky on most Ravenfield maps, so it's hard to count this one as a legit con. All in all, I absolutely love this map, and it's definitely going in my permanent rotation. I want to do something new and rate the map based on some different categories. So in terms of atmosphere, it's a 4 out of 5. Wonderful job with the immersion and the feel of the map, but I'm taking 1 point off for that narrow color palette that I mentioned earlier. For gameplay, it's a 5 out of 5. You can play any loadout, and there's a number of ways to win, but there's not too many ways. You gotta work within the boundaries that the map gives you because there's still intentional design there, and that's why it has a high score. Versatility is a 4 out of 5, meaning that it plays great on every game mode, except the Spec Ops gameplay is a little lacking like I said, but it's nothing game breaking. And finally in performance, it's a 5 out of 5. I don't need to repeat myself here, it runs well. And that gives the map a final score of 18 out of 20, which is almost a perfect score by this arbitrary standard that I just made up. Take it with a grain of salt and go play the map for yourself instead. I've linked it in the description below. If you haven't already, do subscribe also. You can expect a mix of content on this channel that covers indie games, a little bit of Ravenfield like what you're watching now, and who knows what else. We're still growing, and I'd like for you to be a part of it. With all that said, thank you very much for watching. I will see you all again very soon. Goodbye.